Hey everyone, I'm the Canadian Lad, and after watching Marvel films at 0.25x speed for most of my YouTube career, I thought now would be the perfect time to watch some other sci-fi movies in slow motion, especially movies known to be made with great attention to details. I've done Interstellar, Sinners, and other non-comic book films already, and you lads seem to have loved them all. So let's continue the tradition and break down this all-time classic and one of my favorite films at 0.25x speed, where I have found a total of 35 hidden details that will blow your mind. It's hard to believe that a 40-year-old movie had this much hidden details and Easter eggs. No wonder the rewatchability of this film is still incredibly high to this day. So without wasting any of your time, let's jump straight into the hidden details. Number 1. Now this detail is probably one of the most talked about and popular detail from this film. I didn't catch it myself, but I have to get it out of the way. Otherwise, you lads will go crazy in the comment section. The mall where Marty McFly meets Doc Brown for their first time travel experiment is called Twin Pines Mall. Doc Brown mentions that old farmer Peabody used to own all of the land.
Old man Peabody owned all of this.
And had a crazy idea of breeding pine trees all over. Now when Marty goes back in time, he runs over and knocks down one of the pine trees on the Peabody's ranch. And when he comes back to the mall at the end of the film, the name of the mall changes to Lone Pine Mall. And this was our very first hint that the present time that Marty had came back to is an alternate 1985. Alright, this is a detail I didn't catch, all of you did, but I had to get it out of the way. Now let's get into some real fun details. Number 2. At the beginning of the film, all of Doc Brown's clocks read 7:53. Exactly 25 minutes slower than the real time, and that's why Marty gets late for school. And notice there's a clock down on the floor that reads roughly 8:20. It's a bit hard to make out because of the angle, but it's basically one of the few ones in the room that tells the actual time. If Marty had just glanced at that clock, he wouldn't be late. Well, even if he did notice it, he'd probably assume that this one is broken, because every other clock in this room is agreeing with each other. And that tells us director Robert Zemeckis meant it for the audience, to show us that most of the clocks in this room are showing the wrong time except a few. And it gets even better, because there are 2 more clocks that do show the correct time as well. The one on the coffee maker and the one that turns on the TV. Doc had to set these 2 clocks accurately to trigger automation, because the news won't come 25 minutes late on TV. So this clock had to be set correctly. Number 3. Right after the Einstein test run, Doc prepares for another round of time travel. He opens up the plutonium container to restart the DeLorean. And there you can notice that not 1 but 2 cylinders with plutonium are missing. Now obviously one plutonium makes sense as that's what powered the Einstein jump, but why is a second one missing? That implies Einstein wasn't Doc's first time travel test. He probably did an earlier experiment on himself, and only after he was convinced it was safe, that's when he decided to use the Doc for the second experiment. Number 4. When Doc places the plutonium cylinder into the hopper, Marty was holding the camera only using his right hand. But as soon as the cylinder drops into the reactor, he gets so scared he had to hold the camera with both hands. He was practically shaking. This wasn't in the script, Michael J. Fox improvised it on the day of filming. Number 5. When Marty and Doc both walk up to Hill Valley High trying to find George, the entrance is clogged with bicycles. But what's funny is that instead of going around like Marty did, Doc hops on one of the bikes as if he's about to ride it, and then dismounts on the other side and keeps walking. Like that was the most logical option available to him. These subtle comedic moments really prove that for someone like Doc Brown, who's probably one of the greatest scientists of all time, still cannot navigate even the simplest human things in regular life. Number 6. While coming up with a plan to use the lightning strike on the clock tower, Doc Brown says to Marty, "Next Saturday night, we're sending you back to the future."
Next Saturday night, we're sending you back to the future.
Now, as he says the title of the film, notice for a split second, Christopher Lloyd looks directly at the camera, like he's directly talking to us. He then immediately catches himself and moves his eyes just off to the side of the lens. So if you're watching at normal speed, you might not catch it. But at 0.25x speed, it's very clear that this was a deliberate fourth wall break. Number 7. Back to the Future didn't start with Michael J. Fox as Marty. Originally, Marty was played by Eric Stoltz, but the problem was Stoltz was going way too method with it. Like he was playing Marty as if this was some intense character. And director and the team needed Marty to be funny, charming, and quick with the comedy. So after about 6 to 9 weeks of filming, they made the insane call to let Stoltz go. I guess it just wasn't his density. Which means, yes, a huge chunk of the movie had to be reshot from scratch. But here's the funny part. The production has always insisted that there's zero Eric Stoltz footage in the final film, but at 0.2 fabric speed, we see something different. Precisely when Marty is being chased by the Libyans, we can still see a shot of Eric Stoltz as Marty that made it into the final cut. The production still denies it to this day, but this frame doesn't lie. Well, since they gave us such a timeless blockbuster, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and let them off the hook. I don't want to get anyone sued. So officially, on paper, legally, that's not Eric, that's my mama. Number 8. At the end, when Doc ziplines down the cable to connect everything in time, watch closely at his hands. We can actually see this smoke coming off his gloves, because the friction from sliding down that line would absolutely heat things up. And it's not just one frame either. We notice it even more when he's carrying the cable over to the lamppost. That little trail of smoke is still there. For a movie that came out in 1985, that's some crazy attention to detail. Number 9. When Marty shows Doc the family photo to prove he's from the future, Doc says it's clearly a fake photo as part of his brother's hair is missing. Now, even though Doc said it jokingly, but the bigger picture here is that Marty's brother was already in the process of getting erased from existence. Because by the time Marty shows him this picture, the timeline is already changing. Marty has already interacted with Lorraine and has already messed up the chain of events that leads to his parents getting together. So Doc was right on the money here without even knowing. That hair being missing is the first visible sign that Marty's brother is already being wiped out of existence. Number 10. When Marty walks into his high school in 1985, the place looks rough, messy, and covered in graffiti. One of the graffiti reads Lorraine Del Calvin. At first glance, that just looks like some random teen vandalism. Until we realized that back in 1955, Lorraine was falling head over heels for Calvin Klein. So this graffiti was basically a public Lorraine plus Calvin message. Meaning Marty, before he time traveled, had no idea that this graffiti in his school was actually about himself the whole time. Number 11. Lorraine calls Marty Calvin Klein because of the underwear. Now what's interesting is that Calvin Klein wasn't famous outside the US at the time. Therefore, they changed it to the most famous brand in each country the movie was being shown. For example, Marty was called Levi Strauss in Spain and Pierre Cardin in France. Probably butchered it. Number 12. At the end of the film, when Doc Brown returns from the future, he's wearing this ridiculous futuristic shades, except if you look closely, they're basically sheet metal sunglasses. Christopher Lloyd could barely see anything while filming this scene. Even though he had to act like these are some ultra-advanced future sunglasses he can perfectly see through. So watch what happens when Doc jumps out of the DeLorean and starts rushing toward Marty. He grabs the gull-wing door first to make sure he's properly out of the car. Then he touches the hood of the car as he takes a step forward. And then he finally grabs Michael J. Fox to know exactly where he has to stand in the scene. It's basically Christopher Lloyd using his surroundings as a guide rail, because he's performing the whole thing practically blind. Number 13. In the opening shot, we see a lot of clocks in Doc's garage. One of them is a recreation of Harold Lloyd's famous clock dangling scene from Safety Last from 1923. They intentionally placed this as an Easter egg, foreshadowing Doc Brown's similar fate, where he hangs by the hour hand on the clock tower. Also, if we assume it's PM instead of AM, this becomes 1955, the exact year Marty time travels to. Number 14. In the scene where Doc made a model of the entire Hill Valley clock tower to demonstrate to Marty his plan to send him back to the future, notice Doc has basically used ketchup bottles and some salt and pepper shakers to make up the model. But notice, to represent the clock tower, he used one of the faces of his wristwatch and set it precisely to 10:04, the exact time the lightning is supposed to hit. I'm gonna say this again, lads. For a movie made in 1985, the attention to details is incredible. I looked further into it and found out that this model was pre-made even before they started filming. Essentially, this is the model they made before they built the sets for Hill Valley. So they just ended up reusing that same model for this scene as well. Which is kind of perfect because it makes Doc's obsession feel real. Number 15. When Marty first arrives in 1955, before he enters town, the billboard advertising Leon Estates shows an image of a model home. Now this is the exact same home that the McFly family lives in 1985. So even though things weren't that great for George McFly, but it seems he did purchase one of the best houses in town. Number 16. In 1955, when Marty gets chased by Biff, Marty grabs a kid's scooter, rips the handlebars off, and basically invents a skateboard in real time. Now notice the skateboard had 8 wheels underneath, and had pieces of flint added to the back of the board to create the sparks. Now in reality, an 8-wheel skateboard would be a nightmare to maneuver, as the extra wheels would make it very difficult to turn, which shows just how awesome Marty McFly really is. Number 17. When Doc successfully sends Marty back to the future from 1955, notice the DeLorean disappears straight into the movie theater marquee that says The Atomic Kid. A time machine that's effectively nuclear-powered, being driven by a 17-year-old kid, and then vanishing into the atomic kid seems like another great Easter egg. Number 18. During the opening sequence, a newspaper clipping shows Doc Brown's family mansion was destroyed and he ended up selling off all 435 acres of land. Now, in the Blu-ray commentary, co-writer and producer Bob Gale suggests that Doc may have burned down the mansion himself to collect the insurance money and fund his time travel research. So this newspaper clipping explains how Doc got the money to do experiments for over 30 years while never having a real job.
It's a capacitor.
It's taken me almost 30 years of my entire family fortune to realize the vision of that day.
Number 19. Right at the beginning, when we're in Doc's lab and the opening credits are rolling in, we get a shot of the drinking man clock. And right around that exact moment, Leah Thompson's name pops up in the credits. Leah Thompson is the actor who plays Lorraine, who's shown to have an alcohol problem to varying degrees throughout the entire trilogy. Number 20. In the scene where Doc from 1955 is watching a videotape from 1985, that shouldn't be possible, because VHS or VCRs didn't exist yet. He shouldn't even have a way to read that tape in 1955, let alone play it on his TV. And even beyond that, videotape tech in general wasn't developed until later. So for Doc to watch this at all, he would have had to come up with an adapter, rig up some homemade playback setup, and basically invent a bridge between future tech and a 1950s television. And this goes to show that even in 1955, Doc Brown was already ahead of his time. Number 21. Doc tells Marty to meet him at the mall at exactly 1:15. But notice when Marty does show up, the time hits 1:16. A subtle way of showing that Marty is always late, just like he was always late back in 1955. Number 22. A young Lorraine says that Marty is such a nice name. Now, in the alternate 1985, however, she still named her first son David, meaning Marty didn't magically become the firstborn name just because the timeline got better. It was only after or while having her second son, she probably remembered that weird guy from 55 named Marty and decided to name her second son after him. Number 23. In the original 1985, before Marty fixes anything, George drinks Miller Lite. But once Marty comes back to the improved alternate 1985, where George is now confident and successful, notice he now drinks Miller High Life, the champagne of beers. And funnily enough, nowadays High Life is significantly cheaper than Light. Number 24. When Marty tells George that he has to ask Lorraine out to the dance, George says he can't because he cannot miss watching the TV show Science Fiction Theater. Now, it was a real-life TV show that aired from 1955 till 57, and one of the actors on the show is called Michael Fox. And when our Michael J. Fox joined the Screen Actors Guild, he couldn't use Michael Fox professionally because it was already taken, so he added the J. His real name, though, is Michael Andrew Fox, but changed it to J so it didn't sound like Michael a Fox. Number 25. Doc calls Marty at 12:28 in the morning and says, "Marty, you didn't fall asleep, did you?" And Marty just casually replies, still in his sleepy voice, "No, Doc, don't be silly," as if falling asleep at 12 in the morning would be a bad thing. The way Michael J. Fox plays out this scene tells you exactly why Eric Stoltz was replaced. You cannot portray such scenes by being way too serious. Number 26. When Marty drops a handful of change on the diner counter to pay for his coffee, notice he had a guitar pick in his pocket. I like how it's just quietly there. Marty being a true guitarist, this seems like another great attention to detail. Number 27. When Marty auditions for the school dance, he plays The Power of Love by Huey Lewis and the News. But what's funny is that Huey Lewis himself is the judge that tells him he's just too damn loud. So Marty is literally playing Huey Lewis's song in front of Huey Lewis, and Huey Lewis is the one who rejects him for being too loud. Talk about meta comedy, eh? Number 28. Marty's Uncle Joey is a convict, and when Marty goes back in time, he meets his baby Uncle Joey in his crib and says he better get used to those bars as his future ends up in prison. But what many people seem to miss is that baby Joey is also dressed in a striped outfit that looks like an old school black and white prison uniform. Number 29. Right after teleporting in 1955, Marty first tries to call Doc Brown on the telephone, but he doesn't pick up. This is precisely because Doc Brown was unconscious from hitting his head in the bathroom. As we know, this is the exact date when he came up with the idea of the flux capacitor, which is basically the birth of the entire time machine idea. Number 30. The red, green, and yellow display in the time circuit is a reference to the time machine from 1960's The Time Machine film. There was practically no reason to make them 3 different colors, but they did. And they did it out of love for that film. 31. As Marty rolls up to the courthouse in the DeLorean, a sign can be seen on the road that reads, "Time to travel? Ask Mr. Foster Travel Service," with the clock showing approximately the same time as the courthouse clock. 32. When Biff chases Marty, you can quite clearly see at 0.25x speed that the actor isn't the same and it's a stunt double. 33. DeLorean's license plate reads "out of time." Seems like a fitting detail for a car that's literally designed to run out of time. 34. The random guy driving the Jeep Marty latches onto in the opening skateboard sequence is Walter Scott, the film's stunt coordinator. 35. The Statler family are basically the transportation kings of Hill Valley. In 1885, Joe Statler's business was called Honest Joe Statler, which was advertised as fine horses sold, bought, and traded. In 1955, it changed to Statler Studebaker, and by present time in 1985, it evolved into Statler Toyota. Number 36. Early on, Lorraine asks George if he was bird watching when her father hit him with his car.
What was it, George? Bird watching?
What, Lorraine?
Now, of course, we know he was watching Lorraine undress, but in the States, women are often referred to as chicks, and in the UK, women are literally called birds. So technically, bird watching is exactly what George was doing. And that's it. This would be my breakdown of Back to the Future at 0.25x speed. I don't think it's possible to fully put into words the kind of impact this movie had on Hollywood. And I'm not just talking about time travel films, I'm talking about blockbusters in general, even to this day. This movie was once considered too risky. It got rejected by studio after studio because they genuinely thought audiences wouldn't connect with this. And now look at us. We're sitting here 40 years later rewatching the same film at 0.25x speed, dissecting each and every little detail. The fictional world they showed through Hill Valley, you'd love to live there, wouldn't you? If you think about it, the reason this movie is so loved is because of the world they showed on screen. No matter what age we are, we'd love to be in that same world as Marty and Doc. Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd gave us the kind of movie theater magic that literally creates lifelong sci-fi fans. The kind of dreams that still make me want to show up for every big sci-fi on opening night. Now, if you enjoyed this video and learned a few details you've never noticed before, do me a favor, please give me a thumbs up. It really helps me a lot. Till then, I'm the Canadian Lad, and I'll see you lads in the next one.